Hello, Internet, and welcome to the Chase Jarvis Live Show here on Creative Live. Brings me great pleasure to welcome you to our conversation today. And speaking of, before we get into that conversation, just a little bit of housekeeping. I want to welcome you to wherever you're viewing that, or from wherever you're viewing this, to Creative Live. We're the world's largest and best place to learn from creators, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders. And today we are sitting down with one of those folks. If you want to ask questions, this is a live recording. So whatever platform you're on, whether you're watching it on Facebook or Instagram Live, YouTube Live, you can type in questions, and your friend here, Chase, the moderator, I get to see those questions, and will do my best to aggregate all of the info from all over the internet and ask a few pointed questions of our guests that you may have. So please share and participate in the conversation. The place where I get the questions first is at creativelive.com/TV. So that is a great place to watch it. If at some point you want to hop off the platform you're at and go there, I get those questions first and can elevate them to our guest. And speaking of guest, he's one of the world's leading experts on peak performance. I have the good pleasure of calling Steven Kotler my friend. Not only is he one of the leading experts on peak performance, but he's also an author, an award-winning journalist, and the founder and executive director of the Flow Research Collective, a group that I have been in contact with and have great reverence for the past several years. He's written 12 books. Yours truly haven't just done a couple. I know the pain, and Steven is an incredible writer, 12 books, including national bestsellers. The Future is Faster Than You Think, Rise of Superman, Stealing Fire, Abundance, Bold, and his new book is part of what we're going to be talking about today, The Art of Impossible. He's been nominated for a couple Pulitzers. He's translated into 40 languages. I've read his work all over Wired, Forbes, Journal, Time, and it brings us great pleasure to have him on the show today. So please, wherever you're on the internet, give me a warm raise the roof, tap the desk, tap the keys, and shout out from wherever you are on the internet in the comments as we welcome my dear friend Steven Kotler to the stage. Steven, what's up, man? Nice to have you back on the show.
Chase, it's great to be with you. How are you?
Legend. Congratulations on your pub week. This is huge, man. This is huge. Congrats on the book. And I'm overjoyed to read your new work and happy to have you on the show.
It's good to be with you. It's good to see you. It's been a couple of years.
Right.
I would like to get it on the hill sooner rather than later. You remember that you used to ride those things that went downhill? I know it was a long time ago and the memory is faint, but
it's true. Well, you were just calling out my Surf Ranch hat, so maybe one of these days we'll be able to get you out to Surf Ranch.
Yes, please.
Dagger. Dagger.
You're so mean.
Dagger. Well, again, we've got folks coming in from all over the world. We've got London in the house. Romania just showed up. Esparto, California. So many folks. Canada, Alberta. We've got Northern Ireland. That's cool. I don't know what time it is there. South America. I need more specific. Argentina. Okay. So to say we have a global audience would be an understatement. But one of the reasons that they're here is because we want to know how to be the best versions of ourselves. And if I know anything about you and your work, which I feel like I know a lot, this book is the culmination of decades worth of research and time spent. And so I want you to start out with what's the premise of this latest pile of research and the thesis that the impossible is now possible?
I don't know where to start. He pauses. At the heart of the art impossible is a number of simple ideas. When we say peak human performance, we mean nothing more, or I guess less, than getting our biology to work for us rather than against us. And it turns out that biology it's a limited tool set. It's a bunch of stuff there's going on, a bunch of different things we have to train and learn how to do and whatever, but it's the same for everybody because it was created by evolution. It's foundational. And the tools for peak performance are hardwired into all of us. So there's these assumptions that peak performance is something it's reserved for elite athletes or geniuses or whatever. And it turns out, no, It's just we all share the same biology. If you can learn to use your biology to get it to work for you in a certain sequence, in a certain order, the way it was designed by evolution to work, you end up going farther, faster, with a lot less fuss. In other words, we're all biologically designed to go big. That's what the system is built for. And neuroscience has finally advanced to the point that we're like, oh, wow, here's the blueprint, here's the formula. And this is relatively recent, right? A bunch of people have been looking at large portions of the formula. There's great books on focus or on flow or on gratitude or on motivation or on all the pieces. But what we now have learned over the past couple of years is they all fit together in a very particular way. And if you get the system working the way it was designed to work, you get to go big. Well, simple version.
Yeah, no, but that is the thesis, I think, is so important because there are people tuning in from all over the world. And I don't know anyone who walks around thinking that I don't want to be the best version of myself. And so if we can abstract, one level from that and say, okay, let's assume that everyone wants to be the best versions of themselves, then we have to find a way to get away from just like productivity hacks or just motivation or any of those 5 sort of elements that you talked about, these key intrinsic drivers, which is a key piece of the book. You can see all my little dog ears. And it seems like, again, if you go back at this abstracted level that everybody wants to be their best, what is ambiguous is the how. And my understanding is, that this is what you've ultimately tried to decode.
Let's talk it through the sort of, I started studying those moments in time when the impossible became possible, right? I started doing this in action adventure sports, which is how you and I have a connection, but I did this in business, in technology, in science, and whatever. And that's what you would call capital I impossible, right? Doing that which has never been done. And so the book is lessons learned from people who have accomplished capital I impossible. It's meant to be used by anybody interested in what I call lowercase I impossible or small I impossible. Lowercase I impossible is all those things that you think are impossible for you, right? This is stuff that's, I wish I could do it, but I'm not built that way kind of thing. When I was growing up in Cleveland, Ohio, I wanted to be a writer. Cleveland, Ohio was a blue-collar steel mill town in the 1970s. I didn't know any writers. I didn't know how you became a writer. There was no internet. There were no books on this stuff. There was no clear path between where I was and where I was desperate to go, and statistically lousy odds of success, right? That is a small I impossible. So was rising out of trauma, getting paid for what you love, being a successful creative of any kind, being a successful entrepreneur, becoming world-class at anything you do, etc. Those are small I impossibles. And it turns out, because it's just your biology and it's just getting your biology to work for you rather than against you, all the shit you need to go after capital I impossible, turns out it's the same for small I impossible. But hold on one second. If what you're actually you're like, dude, small I impossible, okay, we can get there, but I am just trying to frickin' survive Monday. Like, I need to be more productive next Monday. Well, guess what? The biology is the same because it's the only toolkit you got. So whatever level you want to play at, if your premise is correct that everybody listening to this wants to be better than they are, then this is the toolkit. And what's, as you pointed out, what's breakthrough, what's super exciting is that neurobiology over the past 5 to 10 years has said, oh, we've seen, not only have we seen all the parts, we are starting to see how the parts work together. And that seems to be one of the bigger deals here.
Your statement there absolutely 100% parallels the thesis behind this platform, behind CreativeLIVE, behind my work. And we're using, I use the word creativity, like the foundation. If you want to create the life doesn't happen. Life is created. We're dealt a set of cards and we have to create the best outcome with the set of cards that we have. And that takes work and effort and understanding and insight and trial and error. And to me, this is why I've always loved your work, is because it's the perfect parallel and required to achieve the thing that I'm talking about and have been in this community of creators, entrepreneurs, and small businesses that are watching today, is that this is the how to control your biology to allow you to do the work that you need to do to create the thing. And so let's start at the start. You said you're starting to understand not just the biochemistry because we've already understood what sort of what role dopamine, say, plays in the equation. But for those who are new to your work, maybe new to this as a concept, talk to us about the ingredients, and then let's shift into talking about how these things work together, which is the essence of your book. And again, we're live today, so if you're just now joining us, welcome. I'm Chase, founder CEO of CreativeLIVE, here with my dear friend Steven Kotler, I would say the foremost leader in the psychology, the neurochemistry, and the ability to put these Lego bricks together for the peak performance that we know you are capable of doing. And his new book, The Art of Impossible. So go back to my question there, Steven. Take it away.
So when you say peak performance, when we say, hey, there's a limited set of cognitive tools, right? We're mostly focusing on cognitive peak performance. There's some stuff in the book that focuses on physiology. Like if you want to perform at your best, you got to sleep 7 to 8 hours a night. And you know what, like that kind of stuff, really basic, but I break down the reasons why, but whatever. These are mostly cognitive tools. And the way I like to explain it is, so I'm going to use words like motivation and learning and a couple other things, but you should understand that when I say motivation, for example, this is a catch-all term. When psychologists say motivation, they mean extrinsic motivation, things we want in the real world, money, sex, fame. Intrinsic motivation, things like passion, purpose, autonomy, mastery, goals, and grit. So their motivation is a placeholder for a set of skills. So when you talk about peak performance, conversation has to start with motivations. Where the conversation starts, because it's the energy that gets you into the game, right? Learning, and by learning, I mean a whole subset of skills that would fall under that heading, is what keeps you there. Creativity, as you just so eloquently pointed out, especially if you're going after high, hard, quasi-impossible goals, it's how you steer. And then flow, which is the optimal state of consciousness that we're all hardwired to produce, is how you turbo boost everything kind of beyond all reasonable expectations. That's the full suite. And flow gets you into the game, motivation gets you into the game, learning keeps you in the game, creativity allows you to steer, flow lets you turbo boost the whole thing. That's everything we're talking about. And when you talk about an order, we evolved in a certain way in a certain environment. So these skills came online and were linked together biologically in certain ways. This is not saying that like, if you're great at if you're great at learning skills and don't have motivation, you can't be a peak. People do this in their own way in every other direction. It's just that if you do it the way the system was designed to work, it just works more efficiently with a lot less mess, like any system, right? You can use a vacuum cleaner as a hammer, absolutely, but it's not going to be good for the vacuum cleaner, right? And there's a more efficient way to pound in a nail. You can use a system and get successful results, not using it not the way it's designed to use, but if you use it correctly, it's just going to work better.
Better. It's just going to work better. Okay. I want to be better. I want my stuff to work better. Let's take it from 30,000 feet to the person right now who's sitting in that same steel town you were and has a desire to, as you said, maybe not win the NBA dunk contest or not, hurl themselves out of a hot air balloon that's 35 miles above the surface of the earth, but wants to get their business off the ground, wants to transition out of a life that they're currently living to something new. What's square one?
It's a great question. And it's what the science shows is, fortunately or unfortunately, it starts outside ourselves. It starts in the extrinsic world. We need enough money to pay our bills with a little leftover for discretionary income. And the reason is this: if you can't, where's my rent coming from? Where's my food coming from? How do I take care of my needs, my family's needs? If you're up against that stuff, your system is producing so much anxiety, and anxiety blocks performance so significantly. What the research consistently shows is solve that problem first. Solve that problem first. Make, like, whatever it is, solve it in a way so your basic needs are met. And it's really interesting. Daniel Kahneman did this original research, right? And the split for single families is at $75,000 a year. So like 10 years ago, he found that like if a husband who had a wife and a child was making $75,000 a year, that was enough to pay all the bills, cover expenses, and have a little leftover discretionary, that this starts to work. So what's the example for an individual? Everybody's got their threshold, but, and depends on where you live and what you're doing, et cetera. So we're not going to go there, but it starts with the extrinsic. Once that box is checked, and remember, this is pay your bills, a little left over for discretionary. I am not saying you have to get rich to start. I'm saying literally if you can get a little above minimum wage, you're probably okay to get going on this stuff. Then you got to turn to intrinsic motivators, right? What the research shows is certainly we don't stop wanting money, sex, and money, sex, fame are not the motivators you want to reach for then. Then you want to reach for intrinsic motivators. And what the research shows is there are five. There are five that are the big, there are tons more, right? We could spend the next 4 hours listing all the shit that motivates us, but there are five big ones on an internal level. Curiosity is the most basic foundational human motivator. And we'll talk about what that even means in a second, but curiosity is designed biologically to be built into passion. When we say passion, what do we really mean? We mean the intersection of multiple curiosities plus dopamines you get from little wins playing at that intersection of those multiple curiosities. That's how you build passion. Once you have passion, the system wants you to have purpose, right? It wants you to align that passion to a cause greater than yourself. Basically, the idea is at the level of passion, your biology says, oh, you've got passion now. You're getting enough resources for yourself. Now is the time to get more resources for your tribe, your species, your family, people outside yourself. Thus, the motivator gets linked to purpose. Once you have purpose, what does the system want? Autonomy, the freedom to pursue your purpose. And once you have that freedom, the system demands mastery, which are the skills to pursue that purpose well. This is not to say that you can't start working on mastery before you cultivate curiosity, passion, you know what I mean? But if you do it in this order, you get the best results because this is how the system was evolved to sort of work. And by the way, for anybody listening, how do you do everything I just said? Yeah, you can go to The Art of Impossible, and you should go to The Art of Impossible. But if you go to www.passionrecipe.com, there is we took basically the first 3 chapters of the book, turning it into an interactive workbook, because so many people are like, I want passion. How do I get passion? I want purpose. How do I get purpose? Well, there's a biological formula, and we built an interactive worksheet, gave you a tutorial. It's yours free. Go crazy.
Say the URL again, and we'll have our crew put it in the comments.
Passionrecipe.com. www.passionrecipe.com. So that's just how to do it so we don't have to linger too long. But let's just for a second back up, because there's so much this as well as I do, Chase. I'm sure you see this a lot. Passion and purpose, these terms get mystified in today's world. And from a performance standpoint, there's nothing really mystical going on. Why does passion matter? We pay more attention to those things we believe in. It happens automatically. Think about your last romantic partner when you were falling in love, how you couldn't stop thinking about them or looking at them. Did you expend a lot of energy to do that? Or did it just happen naturally without you having to do any work? That's why passion matters. Purpose actually gets more of our attention, and we actually get more feel-good reward chemistry from it. Same thing with autonomy, same thing with mastery. This stuff feels really, really good when it happens, and because it feels really, really good, we're much more motivated and we get focused for free. That's all we're talking about here. There's nothing super mystical going on. I'm not saying that purpose isn't good for the world. There's an altruistic or possibly even a spiritual quality to purpose, but I'm saying from a peak performance perspective, it's entirely selfish. It means more reward neurochemistry for you so you feel better, and more focus for free so you do less work.
Focus for free. When I survey the landscape of my past and the landscape of people who are in this community, I feel like that is a huge disconnect for most people. You look at someone like, oh my gosh, how did this person do it? Where did the motivation come from? Where did they got knocked down so many times? And I find at my job, when my boss is mean to me, or when I miss a deadline or whatever, I feel like I'm back to square zero. And I think that really does get at the core, just sharing that URL that you did, the passion recipe. because those people have tapped into something different. And there's so many people. I think that going from 0 to 1 is so hard because we're not in a culture that sets up to reward it for that exploration and that curiosity. And this is why it
Well,
goes.
the other thing, Chase, is this. I mean, the passion recipe for everybody should be warned. Couple things, two things. One, you have an idea in your head. I would guess most of us do, of what passion looks like in the real world. Like if I say, Chase, give me an example of athletic passion, you're going to give me LeBron James windmilling in for a dunk in the finals. And that is passion. You are totally right. But that is late stage passion. That is passion that has been developed over decades and decades and decades. And passion on the front end doesn't look, and more importantly, doesn't feel like that. So if you go in expecting to feel like you think LeBron feels going in for a windmill dunk, you're mistaken. It doesn't feel that way. And B, you're going to constantly be let down. Like you were talking about your community being frustrated going 0 to 1. A lot of people have problems going 0 to 1, not because they're doing anything wrong. You're actually cultivating curiosity and you're going through. The other thing is this, it takes a while. And it should take a while. You don't want to be 2 years into your passion and discover, oh shit, it was only a phase. Turns out I don't actually want to spend the next 5 years in Egypt on a dig in the desert in the sand because I don't want to be an archaeologist. I was wrong, right? You don't want to do that. It's super demotivating. It fucks you up later on, pardon my language, going forward. You really don't want to do it. You want to get it right the first time. So it's a slow onboarding process that can take a few months because you have to learn how to grow passion, grow curiosity into passion so it starts to feel like you want it to feel. And the second thing that you pointed out, and I want to mention this, most entrepreneurs have end to one as a problem because they don't know what they're passionate about. They can't get there. And then there's a second problem that comes in right after that, right? You have the intrinsic motivators that get set up. Then there's 3 tiers of goal setting that we tend to need. And then, by the way, the system will start producing more flow, which is a good thing because then you have to start training grit. Because grit is exactly the thing you need once passion, purpose. People think it's a panic. This is the other piece of reason people get delayed end to 1 is why, or 0 to 1 is why I'm bringing it up here. They think just because you have passion or purpose, it's easier. It doesn't feel bad. None of those things are true. In fact, I will tell you that every peak performer you'll ever meet will tell you the experience that there's going to come a point when your passion and your purpose becomes your prison, and that is the worst spot to be in. And it's everybody goes through it. It's going to happen, right? You can't do this work without finding yourself in a prison of your own devising at some point. And you think not having passion is a problem? Wait till you're in a prison of passion, right? Wait till you have it. Yeah. Be careful what you wish for, people. It's just there are lots of complications along the way, but the system is designed to handle it, which is the good news. We're all built to handle it, but it's not going to feel great every time, even with passion and purpose.
Well, this intersection of passion and purpose, I think, is obviously, that's key to, you talked about curiosity and autonomy and things that are greater than you. But as soon as we realize we've got something, right? Let's just say you've experimented, and you don't have to have everything. Your life purpose does not come to you in an email with a subject line that says life's purpose. So this is a very active and
wait, Chase, that was my experience. I mean, I didn't know, and then somebody sent me an email. That's not everybody's experience. My bad.
Oh man, no, it's true. It's like it doesn't come in an email, or someone doesn't show up your door and hand you an envelope. So there's this process of discovery, and part of discovery, as you talked about, is curiosity, this intertwining thing. And this idea that you have to know the entire staircase before you begin is another place where people absolutely struggle. This is about skill acquisition. It's about tapping something that is interesting to you, and if you follow it and it leads to a dead end, great. The chances are, though, that dead end, you don't have to backtrack very far to find the next leg, the next trail, if you've gone off trail. And that is, to me, what brings in a key piece of this book, which is the learning. Once you tap into a thing, then you are in this world of my light bulb went on when I realized that when I'm curious about photography, for example, and I had uh, whatever 15 plus years of learning experience in a box on a hill, going to school, getting tested and doing all the things we do in school. And then as soon as I tapped into photography, this idea of learning had a completely different view. I had a completely different view on it. It was like, no, I had to learn to see if this was a thing. And if I did this thing, did that bring me joy? How did I feel inside? And so learning shifted from a thing that other people were making me do to jump through some hoop for them to a thing that could potentially unlock. And I say potentially because we may hit some dead ends, but you have to engage your active faculties towards skill acquisition.
No,
to,
I'm laughing because I remember I'd been writing every day since I was like, I don't know, young. And I got to college, and I remember somebody was like, "Are you going to major in creative writing?" And I was like, "Wait a minute, this is something I have to go learn." Like, haven't I been like learning all like what like I because I couldn't, it didn't equate what I was doing, which was learning the craft of writing, with actual learning until somebody pointed out that, hey, there are classes for this, and I was like, holy crap, that's what I've been doing this whole time. Oh, okay, you call that learning? Cool, because I thought learning is what you did in school, and it felt really different,
yeah, absolutely true. The
right?
same, my story is similar. I was doing the going. I'm going to go to medical school because that was something that was revered in our culture. And then partway through, I was just reading all these novels and philosophy and getting so inspired and in touch with the things that were going on in my heart. And then someone said like, "Well, yeah, are you getting a photography or a philosophy degree?" And I was like, "They have degrees in this stuff? You mean I can
I,
read the same shit I'm reading?" Literally, it was like I can read the same shit I'm reading. And so there's this world over here that is just like I am bulldozing a a field that goes on forever. And I look up and seems like I'm further back than when I started. And then there's this other path where I can do the things that I want. And when you think about learning the things necessary to be great, and you can apply yourself in either direction, why would you ever plow someone else's field, to invoke a funny euphemism there? But when you can just go to your universe, study creative writing, the thing that you're doing anyway, and get better at it when you've got all this intrinsic, see earlier points motivation. So let's land this in which is one of the key cornerstones in your book around learning. Give us some advice on learning.
okay, don't. Okay, I'm going to talk about two things. The first is this is something we spend a bunch of time on it in the book, but I say that there are preconditions. If you look at peak performance, you look at how they approach learning, a bunch of skills there. What are the skills that get you into the game? Well, what do we know? We know you got to have a growth mindset and an internal locus of control. That means you feel like you're in control of your life, because if you don't, the brain can't learn. So one, you got to start there. That's just obvious. Next step, you need what I call, the term I use is truth filters, which is how do you assess what you're learning quickly? Is it real? Is it not? You want to learn from the best materials. And if you're learning anything difficult, right? Skill acquisition is one thing, right? Because you can see, oh, he plays the guitar, it sounds like the guitar, that's real. But if it's knowledge acquisition, and especially if you're playing at the cutting edge of something, how do you know what's real and what's not? Because there's a lot of both. And where the gray area is, there's opportunity, there's exploration, there's a lot of stuff there, but you need to know. Truth filters. I learned how to, reporters do it a specific way. If you can get five outside sources, in my experience, if you can get five outside sources to validate a fact, you can trust the fact. Scientific method is another way of doing this. Elon Musk has been advocating for first principle thinking. Doesn't matter. Make up your own. Doesn't matter. The point is, you got to know, how do I quickly evaluate information for its quality? That's one thing. So when you think about learning, there's a process and there's some meta skills, this being one of them, associated with it. And then the thing I really want to talk about is, in the book, I break down what I call the 5 not so easy steps for learning anything. The only thing I want to point out is, because it ties in so much with what you said about intrinsic motivation. Step 1 is basically what I call the 5 books is stupid. And it's a way to kind of get yourself familiar enough with the subject that you can start asking smart people, experts in the subject, good questions about it. Because if you're going to go to all the trouble of getting in the room with an expert in the thing you want to learn, you don't want to ask them anything you can look up. You're wasting their time. They know it, and they're going to give you less time, first of all. And you know it. You could have gotten it elsewhere, right? You want to like get to the point that you can actually leverage expertise. How do you do it? It's a process for reading. The thing that I want to point out here is when people try to learn and read, they make a very bad mistake. They learned in school that you have to learn in a specific certain way, and that is effective if you're taking tests. But if you're trying to learn for yourself, you literally want to follow your curiosity through a subject. Why? Because every time you feel curiosity, every time your brain goes, wow, that's weird, take a note, right? That's the stuff to remember. That's the stuff you really want to focus on, because when you're curious, the brain has a neurobiological reaction that literally primes it for learning. So when you're curious, that's your brain way of saying, I am now primed for learning. I'm going to make it really freaking easy for you. And all you got to do is take a note about this thing and just write your question or blah, blah, blah. You want to follow your curiosity through subjects. There's a couple other things that are worth paying attention to. What I tell people is, if you look at your brain, two things to know. One is that your brain loves narrative. So pay attention to the history of a subject, because if you can sort of start putting a timeline together, right? Oh, this happened first, this happened second, this happened third. And remember, whatever subject you want to learn, however fancy it is, it's just a voyage of curiosity. Some dude had a question. Some dude answered that question. It led to another question. It led to another question, and so forth. That's all you're learning. A bunch of people had questions. People answered it. It's a narrative. It happened in an order. And since the brain, we have narrative storytelling machines for brains. Brain loves cause and effect. It wants to know what happened first. What did it lead to? So I can, right? That's what brains do all the time. And which is why we love narrative, why we love story, all that stuff. So pay a little bit of attention to the history of a subject, because it gives your brain this macro. It's like you get the Christmas tree. All the facts you're going to learn are the ornaments, but if you give your brain the basic Christmas tree, it's going to do what it does naturally, which is put things in an order and turn them into a story, without you having to do the work. You just have to pay a little bit of attention there. The next thing you want to pay attention to is, the vocabulary of a subject. And I always say, if you encounter a word while trying to learn something that you don't recognize, ignore it. If it shows up 5 times in one thing, look it up. And every time you see it from that point on, say the definition out loud until it's locked in. And the reason you want to pay attention to the terminology, jargon and terminology is annoying. It's pretentious. It's all those things. It's difficult. But what you learn after you've learned a bunch of subjects is that oftentimes most of the subject is contained within the terminology. The terminology are like Homo sapiens. You could just say humans, but Homo sapiens gives you the genus, the species, and if you translate it, wise ape, the idea that we thought we were smarter than other hominids, whether or not it's true, right? Like, you get a whole bunch of shit packed into one term. It means a lot of stuff. A lot of subjects are hidden inside the terminology. So pay attention to the terminology, pay attention to the history a little bit, really pay attention to what I call the emotional wows, the point that your brain goes, whoa, what the hell is this? And it starts automatically doing those connections. Oh, what about this? What about this? What about this? That's what you take notes on. That's what you pay attention to. You follow your emotional wow moments through subjects, and learning becomes, as you said, delightful and doesn't feel like learning.
I need to be clear to everyone who's watching and listening right now. What you're hearing Steven talk about is what I believe is potentially the most misunderstood thing in our culture, from getting people from where they are right now to where they want to be. And it is following your curiosity. Because let's extract this for a second and say, when you want to be your best, and what Steven's saying here, and I agree with, is that you right now today, who you are, can be world class at something if you find the thing that actually makes your heart sing. Because it's like a tractor beam. It starts pulling you rather than you pushing all of the rocks up hills with you. And the thing that Steven is talking about in finding a way to explore your curiosity, you're using reading. The same thing could be true for YouTube videos. It can be true for, attending conferences. It can be true for so many things. But if something like gives you a buzz, and you can latch on to that information and pull from one thread, swing from one vine to the other. Like, this is the key to becoming world class, and I would argue to unlocking the potential that exists in you right now today. The potential. Now, maybe, you're not going to, if you, maybe you're not going to play in the NBA, or maybe you're not going to discover the right set of fuel to propel the rocket to the outer limits of the solar system. But there are 10 other things that you are in love with in here somewhere, that you have aptitude for, that if you decide to pull on those strings, you will be so much further along than the things that you're doing right now. And learning how to do that, essentially just following your curiosity and trusting that if you jump from one page of a book to a YouTube video to all these other different aspects, that you're actually, that's doing it right. And no one is saying that out there in the world. So pay attention.
I want to talk about the thing that you just said also, because it's really worth drilling into one extra second, because not a lot of people say it out loud. What we're not saying is genetics, early childhood experience, like if you're 5'4", you're probably not going to play in the NBA. You could be Muggsy Bogues. You could be Muggsy Bogues. That, like, there are random outliers, right? And I don't want to poo-poo anybody's dream of trying, but what both of us are in absolute agreement on is everybody is great at something. Mm-hmm. The way I always put it is, I have been around the world. I've met so many goddamn people. It's ridiculous. As a journalist, as in everything else, I've never met, or very rarely meet, dumb people. I don't do it. What I have discovered is, if you can figure out what language somebody speaks and what they're passionate about, everybody's smart about something. So you figure out what that is and you try to learn from them about that thing. That's what I did as a journalist. That's sort of what I've done as everything. But like, I spent my career finding excellence in peculiar corners, and that's what it always looks like. There's something else I want to say. This isn't really an art impossible, but in talking about it a lot, it's come up a lot, and it's very closely related to what you're saying, because I think there's a mistaken conception out there in popular culture about going after your dreams or all this stuff, which is, a lot of people are now, I'm hearing a lot like, oh, I'm really broken. I've got trauma. I've got this and that. I got to fix me before I can start going after my dreams. I hear that a lot. And I want to point out that every single successful person I've ever met in the world is running from something just as fast as they're running towards something. And the process of like running away from whatever they, want, you need both motivations to get where you're going. So if you're starting from broken, that's a good thing, not a bad thing. Like, that's where it always starts. That's the only place it can start. So don't say, what I'm hoping we're doing, if we're doing anything here, is we're removing your excuses for going after what you want. Is hopefully what we're doing.
No, it's true, but there's also like this idea of how I'm just tracing my experiences talking to hundreds of people on this show, the hundreds of world's top creators and entrepreneurs who, like yourself, have classes on CreativeLIVE. This is an absolutely common thing that continues to be buried in our culture, not because it's a mystery or because people don't talk about it, because it's just not that sexy. Like, how you swing from one vine to the next in your
I'm laughing. I have to interrupt you because I've said, this is all over the place at this point. I keep saying, so the biggest problem with all the work I do is nothing I do, if you apply it in your life and then talk about it at a bar on Friday night, is going to get you laid. It's not sexy. It's just, that's one of the biggest problems. Everybody wants something whiz bang or sexy or whatever, and fine. But what works is really simple and foundational and psychological and physiological in really basic ways. Because we evolved in an environment that was millions of years old. It was a very different environment. It was a lot simpler.
I'm going to paint a little picture just to endorse your point here. I'm in the middle of learning something new, and it's an exciting new area of opportunity for CreativeLIVE, and it gives me a lot of energy to think about it. And I'm just going to give you a picture of my Sunday. So I sat at that coffee table back there, and on the coffee table, I had my laptop open, I had my phone going, I had two books on the table and two hardback books on the table and one on my Kindle, and I literally was bouncing back and forth between all of these things. When one would point to another, I would look it up, I would watch that video. That video would then point me to another author. I would go on my Kindle, I would buy that book, I would open that book. I mean, and is this efficient? Is this laser-like focus? No, but that's actually not the objective when you're trying to take an idea of a concept and figure out, where do I focus my attention? Right now, I'm in like, what are the important things, and how can I corroborate 5 different points of view? How can I find what's important and what's not? How do I learn the vocabulary? And this is an area that's interesting to me. And I just don't see like a recipe anywhere that says that that's how it happens. But if I know you, and I go back and I look at like 5 different things that are in my ecosystem about how I've done anything, or how the people that teach on Creative Live have uncovered their stuff, that's how. That is how. And this is why this learning section, again, if you're just joining us, we're with Steven Kotler talking about the art of the impossible, how to find the thing that you're supposed to do and get world class at it, to do things that, whether they're capital I impossible that the world cannot survive, or they're small I impossible, or small I impossible that you can do today with this one life. I want you to take us from learning to creativity, because that's the next important step in your book.
So all the learning in the world Chase, I miss you. You've gone away. We could make fun of his legs.
So again, to transition from the learning part to the creating part, help us with the transition here.
So the transition is simple. All the learning in the world isn't gonna, if you're going after impossible goals, by definition, there's no clear path between where you are and where you want to get to. So learning may feed the engine and fill it, but you still are going to need creative problem solving, creative decision making, creative execution, innovation to go A to B. That's the next step, right? The impossible always requires creativity. These high hard goals always require creativity in your approach. And I'm using creativity in the broadest sense of the term here.
Capital C. Yep.
Yeah. And I mean, we could stop and list all the you want to make more money, you want to be happier, you want to be more successful. Like we could go on and on about why, but it's Creative Live. We all know that creativity is the secret sauce, but it has to come after learning. And what's cool about creativity is, as you know, we were not great at training creativity in the 20th century. We kind of sucked at training creativity in the 20th century. In the 21st century, thanks to great advances in psychology, great advances in this kind of work you guys are doing, where you get huge data sets of creatives that nobody's had access to, that kind of stuff. And the neurobiology of creativity, we now know a hell of a lot more about it, and we have figured out how it's trainable. We are understanding how it works in the brain, and it's not being more creative is about. It's not as logical as straightforward. Of course, it's creativity. It's a little illogical, and right, like the way you go at it. But we now understand. Here's the neurobiology. Here's how creativity works in the brain. Here's how you state shift to be more creative. Here are the conditions that allow creativity to foster. And the other thing, and this is the thing that I love in my book, It's one of the things I'm sort of proudest of, even though it's only in there for a little bit, which is there's a section on long haul creativity. Because, right, it's not just enough to stimulate creativity, more creativity for this or that project. We don't want to just be successful for a month or a year. We want to be successful and creative over the course of an entire career. So long haul creativity over an entire career, is a very new subject to science. It hasn't been well studied, but the book contains some of the earliest research and some really fun insights into how do you sustain creativity over time as well.
This idea of a lifelong, again, it marries with, I think, philosophically, one of the reasons that you and I have had, many multi-hour conversations about this is because it underscores the point that what we're developing is a habit. It is sort of an orientation. It is a belief system. It is a process that you go through rather than some end state. It's not a product. Creativity is not a product. It is a way of operating in the world, I think, to use John Cleese's phrase. Tell me why that was something you were most proud of when you framed that.
What I liked about the long haul, first of all, the research was really fun, right? I got to talk to, people like Sir Ken Robinson and, lots of really just smart, our mutual friend, Tim Ferriss, and, lots of really smart people about sustaining creativity over time, which I thought was really interesting. And what I'm proud about it, or what I like about it, what I think is important about it, is that, for example, many of the core, if you want to sustain creativity over a lifetime, as you know, you're sooner or later going to have to figure out how to get paid for your creativity. And the business of creativity is literally counterproductive to what it takes to be more creative in the world. So like these things are literally at odds with one another, and yet creatives have to find a way through, which is the job of a creative anyways, right? But it's tricky and counterintuitive, and there's a lot of stuff in there. I'll give you a simple example. I don't know if this is an art impossible or something that I teach in flow for writers, but it's relevant nonetheless. So creative careers have stages. The first stage of a creative career is making a name for yourself as yourself. That's what you do. And you get known for your ideas, your thing, your whatever. And once you do that, for example, as a writer, I spent my 20s becoming Steven Kotler, right? Like I was a voice. I had a, I blah, blah. But I got to my 20s, I got to my 30s, and I had reached the level of, oh, now you get to write for the New York Times. Now you get to write for Wired. Now you get to write for the top publications in the world. You think they gave a fuck about Steven Kotler? Wired didn't care about Steven Kotler. They want the best damn Wired story Steven Kotler can write, but their product is a Wired story. And my ego and my great style and everything that got me there, they could care less about. So you need all this ego to get to the first stage of a creative career. And the second stage of a creative career, you have to be creative inside other people's boxes, often for 5 to 10 years before you get to burst forth as yourself again, right? That's the apprenticeship portion of it. And that means like that whole ego that you spent a decade developing, protecting, nurturing, learning how to be ferocious with, you got to freaking check at the door and park for a while and be somebody, I always, the way I put it really, harshly is if you're a creative, you're always somebody's bitch. There's no way around it, because when you get to where you want to go, and you know this as well as I do, you have an audience. And if you think publisher, everybody brought you up was demanding, wait till you have an audience. And right, they're very and nobody wants to talk about it, but like you're always working for somebody, and which is difficult for creatives, because creatives is, I don't want to work for anybody. I want to do my thing. And at every step, there's, and I'm not saying you have to play the position, you have to do things in a certain way. You just have to know that this is how it works, and this is what you're going to encounter along the way. So if you don't like it, cool, change it, do something different. But like, this is what happens along the way, no matter who you are.
Spoken. Well, Mary Lever, Drew, Radonna, Ed, folks chiming in again from all over the world. We've got Trinidad in the house, lots of other locations around the world, and there's a set of questions that are around the shift from learning to creating. And I want to take that in the concept of or in the context of your last sort of point here. This is that there are a series of frameworks that you're going to go through on your way to doing what some may believe is impossible, and that you are on your life journey of demonstrating that not only is it not possible, but watch me do it. You're going to have to go through several phases, and each of these, this idea of learning and then creating something, like you had to learn to write in a way that would attract the attention of the New York Times, and then it was the writing that the process of honing something, a message so crisply that the New York Times editor was like, yeah, this is good. And then you're then taking that skill that you learned in writing critically and thoughtfully and then applying it to another area. So there's this dance. I'm wondering if you can help talk about.
Yeah, there's a couple things worth poking at here, at least. One, the brain at a very foundational level does pattern recognition. That's what neurons do. They link like with like. This is a foundational component of the brain. Creativity, right? It is, depending on what term you want to use, but in the brain, it's a recombinatory process. It's what happens when the brain takes in novel information and connects it to older ideas. The farther flung that older idea is from the novel information, the more unusual the connection, the more creative we tend to often say it is. But your brain does this automatically. So you literally, the thing that people are wanting, which is how do I go from what I'm learning to how do I turn it into something interesting in the world? How do I make it creative? That actually is automatic. You don't have to worry about that. In fact, one of the things, I'll give you an interesting point here. I talk about this in the book. It's one of my tips on creativity is experts in particular domains tend to, over time, as they become more and more expert, tend to learn things that are closer and closer related. You study what you're studying and you're trying to learn. You study. And the problem is you need a little gap between what you're learning and your older information to produce dopamine. The bigger the gap, the more reward chemical you get, right? And dopamine is a focusing chemical, a reward chemical, but it also enhances pattern recognition. So when we have dopamine in our system, right, we find more links between things. So that's why creative ideas spiral, by the way, also because when you have an insight, it produces a little dopamine that leads, oh, look, I noticed something else that leads to more dopamine, and creative ideas spirals. One leads to the next. Well, that
go back to my Sunday. Like that's exactly what we're tracing, right? Exactly what we're tracing. Sorry, keep going.
So the process is automatic. Like what starts that stuff, it happens automatically. But if you don't read far stuff that you're curious about, but far, like I work in photography. I'm really, really curious about like auto mechanics in the 1920s. You don't have to care about how they're going to link together. Your brain does that automatically. You have to learn about cars in the 1920s and learn about photography, and your brain will do the rest. Now, there are certain things, for example, we talk in the book, I talk about why being in a good mood is super important to creativity from a neurobiological standpoint. There are conditions for creativity. So you can create those conditions, right, for it. But the stuff that the bridge that people are trying to build between how do I get from learning to creative decision problem solving, that's actually automatic. And in a sense, get out of your own way and stop being scared that it's not going to happen, because that fear is actually blocking the creativity. To put this in a little more context, because it'll help people. The more anxiety you feel, the more logical and linear your brain wants to be. This is obvious, right? When there's a big problem in front of you, your brain goes, oh crap, that's a big problem. Now is not the time for all kinds of creative outside the box solutions. I want something tried, true, that I know is going to work because my ass is on the line. You get the extreme example is fight or flight, right? Critical problem in front of you. You get two choices. You can flee, or you can freeze, or you can fight, right? Three choices. That's extreme version, but every little bit of anxiety produces something close. So we can't, you don't want any anxiety. It's going to block the creativity. So if you're worried about, oh, how do I go from learning to creativity? How do I use this information? You're literally creating anxiety, and it's going to block the very thing you're trying to get. You've got to sort of start to understand what your brain will do automatically and where you actually want to intervene. Does that make any sense?
It makes perfect sense to me. And a couple of comments came in that I think are relevant. One from Donald Azell. I'm working in a BS accounting to match work experience, but I want to work on building an app, how to balance those two things. And then Radonna says, I call this going down a rabbit hole. I get caught up in the creativity and the learning. Now I want to try and take what Steven is saying here, those two comments, and saying Steven is actually articulating that is a good thing, that if you can afford to be anywhere besides fight or flight, and when you have and you cultivate some luxury for yourself around the space because you're working a BS accounting job, that should provide financial security, eliminate anxiety, and let you do and dream all the things. What could the app be? And Radonna, going down a rabbit hole is a really important first step. This tension between learning and creating, and figuring out that you like photography and you like cars from the 1920s. You don't need to understand them right now, but this is the blueprint for how to get where you are right now to where you want to go. This is the information that you're going to act on over time. And as Steven just said, you don't actually have to do that work or worry about it. Just keep doing this process. Say what you're going to say. Sorry, bud. Hijacked.
No. One thing. You made two comments on two different people who commented. One on the guy who's working on the app. This is like Tim Ferriss's. I quote him in the book, right? Like, when I was coming up as a writer for my first decade as a writer, I was a bartender. It was great. I was making tons of money at the bar, and I could afford to go down rabbit holes, by the way, right? Like this, my first book took 11 years. I rewrote it from start 4 times in a row because it wasn't right. Those were a lot of rabbit holes I went down, along the way, and bartending allowed me to do that. So even though the one thing may feel a little bit like a prison, it's a prison that liberates, right? And that's worth a damn. And as far as the rabbit hole, there's another side to her comment. I just want to make sure we're not ignoring this, which is sometimes they have a creative project or focus, and along the way the tangents get too delicious, right? This happens a lot in flow. You're in flow, you're writing, you're a musician, whatever, and there's a core thing you're doing, and then there are all these delicious tangents all over the place. And some people can't resist the lure of the tangents when it takes them away from and what I will say on that one is, yes, known issue. Over time, you will learn your tendencies, and will learn to be able to manage your tangents. You will learn what is a fruitful tangent and what is a waste of your time. But there's no way to learn that without going down the rabbit holes a bunch, because everybody's going to be different, right? I can't tell you this is what works for me in tangent. You know what I mean? Like, this is a good tangent, this is a bad tangent. But I will tell you, you'll figure it out over time. It won't become this. It starts out as it's an endless rabbit hole, endless time suck, endless. Of course it is. But as your brain starts to accrue knowledge, right, expertise, the rabbit hole, you know what I mean? You start to be able to navigate. This is sort of what expertise is.
Radonna just chimed back, and she said, this is exactly what I need. I'm learning to trust the process 100%. And
but Ramona, you're gonna, especially in flow, if you're getting into flow in the beginning, this is one of the things, known issue at the Flow Research Collective. We train people to get into flow. We train them to use the flow states creatively. You're going to have you're going to waste some time in the beginning. There's known issue because of this dopamine, because of this pattern recognition. It gets amplified in flow. It gets amplified by creativity. And we have swag at the Flow Research Collective that says never trust the dopamine. And what we mean by that is because dopamine feels so good, every idea feels like a great one. And you're gonna go march down those rabbit holes. On the back end of a flow state, there's a recovery phase, by the way, where there's no more feel-good neurochemistry. And for creatives, this is a really good time. You don't want to do work in recovery because you want to recover, but I always read what I wrote the day. If I was in big flow, I'll read what I wrote in recovery. and I'll just circle everything I don't like. I won't try to do the work because I'm too tired to do the work. I'll just circle what I don't like. And the reason is I've got no more feel-good neurochemistry for a little bit of time. There's a refractory period where my body is building it up again. So if I like what I produced in flow when I'm not in flow, pretty good chance that it was good because I've got no more actual feel-good drugs. So it's probably actually good. And it's I think that's a useful thing. Whether or not we evolved in this way, we can still use it in this way. And I find that's useful. Hopefully that helps answer that question.
Amazing. And we're getting a lot of folks in the comments saying, thank you, buying the book, which reminds me, again, we're with Steven Kotler here for his
Yeah,
new,
guys, go to Amazon
this is huge.
go to Amazon and buy as many goddamn copies as you possibly can, because trying to publish a book in COVID, like all the publishing is broken, and they accidentally overprinted like 40,000 copies. So I now have to sell an extra 40,000 copies. So help me out, people. Buy a lot.
Amazing. But this is, this community shows up and it purchases books from authors that are filtered through this process, and they know that what we bring to the show is quality. And we know this is Steven's
I'm not
showing up for you.
The book, I'm joking. The book swept the bestseller list. We hit 10 bestseller lists last weekend. So I've never done that before. So people are showing up. And you guys have always showed up for me.
Hey, and I think where are we? There's a comment here. I wish I'd seen this 5 years ago. Is LB. Donald says, thanks. It was one of the questions, just buying it right now. Thank you. So again, we're going to show up for you, Steven. And I want to wrap with one last concept. Again, this is imprinted deeply in the book, and so much of what we've talked about around, understanding passion, learning, connecting learning to creating. But specifically, there's this concept in the book about the habit of your potential. Like, how do you get in the habit of living up to your potential? And as a send off, so that we're, again, hyper connected to the work that you've just done in your new book, give us something to pull on with respect to how to make this. It's possible to create this habit around living up to your potential.
This is an idea that's old. It's William James's original idea, the founder of modern psychology. And he basically said most people have what he called the habit of inferiority. They're not in the habit of living up to their full potential, so they're not used to living up to their full potential. At a really simple level, really basic, the way I always like to explain this is I always like to say that 35 years of studying the moments in time that impossible has become possible has taught me a couple things. The first is that we are all capable of so much more than we know. That's what I've learned in 30 years, is that human capability is enormous. The problem is human capability, human potential is invisible to everyone, but especially to ourselves. Our potential is invisible to ourselves. What we're capable of is invisible to ourselves. And the reason is capability is an emergent property. It emerges when we push on our skills, when we use our skills sort of the utmost again and again and again and again. That's sort of all that's required. To put it in different terms, my best friend and I talk about this all the time, which is one of the dirty secrets in peak performance is there's no secret. It is nothing fancier than showing up every day. Like, as a writer, I am going to show up. I'm going to write 1,000 words every day. I am not going to care how I feel about the words. And I'm, by the way, not even going to judge the words. A victory for me is I wrote the 1,000 words. Some days they're great. Some days they freaking suck. But if you write 1,000 words a day, you end up writing about a book a year, and you end up doing what you started this conversation with when you were like, how the fuck did you write 12 books or 13? I think it's 13. By the way, I don't even know. I think it's 13. 12 that are out, and I have a 13th that's coming out in November, but it's already written. So, but yeah, I mean, like, you literally, there's no secret. And the one thing I always want to tell people, because they don't get this, and it's hard to wrap your head around, if you survive being a teenager, you have probably felt the worst that life can produce for you. We know this because we have things called emotional set points that say, hey, by the time you're like 10 or 11, this is the worst you're going to feel on the planet. This is the best you're going to feel. And your whole life is going to take place in between. Those are established. And if you're a teenager, you have no emotional control and your hormones are raging. So you already got the worst of it. Now, you may get the worst of it every single, like it may show up day after day after day after day. That may be in your future, but you've already suffered through the thing that you're afraid of. Right? Like whatever it is that you're afraid of experiencing, you've already felt it. It's already happened emotionally in you. You're tough enough to do this is point A already. If you made it into adulthood, you're probably tough enough to do this already. You've already borne the pain. You can do it. Like literally you've already done it. So stop freaking out about that one. And the second half about it, it really is like by the end of the Art Impossible, yeah, there's a bunch of onboarding stuff, the passion recipe and those kinds of things, but it's about 6 things to do every day and 7 things to do every week. I would guess of those 6 things, if you're listening, if you're involved with CreativeLIVE, you're probably doing a bunch of them already, right? Because the biology is a limited skill set. My point, the thing I'm trying to leave us all with is we don't know what we're capable of. We're capable of more than we know. We get there by pushing on our skills in a very specific way every day, but that's all you have to do. You just have to show up for yourself and do the work and not care about the outcome every day, over and over and over. And sooner or later, those impossibles start falling down. You just start knocking them down.
And if you do it in an area you care about, that's what's going to give you that energy.
Extra lift. Yeah.
The comments are going nuts. Skeeter is asking if the book is available on audio. Yes is the answer. Sarah says, I'm raising teens now. Thank you so much. I'm going to use that. Eric is
wait, I want to talk about one thing because I love this with teenagers. So, because everybody had this experience. People hear like small I impossible, that which we believe is impossible for us. And even that stuff seems really freaking intimidating to people. And I want to point out that chances are, now there may be an exception here, but the first small I most of us go out and solve is we're like 10, 11, 12, 13, and we want that first boyfriend or girlfriend or first kiss or first relationship, right? And it's an impossible, right? You're 11, 12 years old. I would have given you my right arm for like telling me how to get a date with a girl. Like I swear to God, you could have had years of my life in trade at that moment for all. It was a small I impossible, and everybody here has already ticked that box already. So it's worth appreciating that we've done a lot of this stuff already. We don't tend to trust our history on this craziness, but we've got real history here where we're like, oh shit, you did that already. I just want to point that out. I'm sorry, it was a random tangent, but she said,
no, that is lovely. We've already experienced that, and now we just have to put it on repeat and make it actionable and repeatable. And that's what, again, your book, The Art of the Impossible. Thank you so much, Steven, for being on the show. Raise the roof for Steven in the comments. Thank you so much, buddy. And go get them. We're huge fans of yours here at CreativeLIVE. You have an excellent class on CreativeLIVE on CreativeLIVE about flow. That's another good resource to check out.
It is a great resource.
Good luck doing what you're doing. Keep it up. Again, comments. That was incredible. Thank you. Been working on huge projects. Book ordered. Granddaughter that I just had sent 20 books now. 20 books too. So there we go.
That's amazing.
LB, Donald. Okay. Thank you so much for being on the show, bud. Signing off for those of you out there in the world. Make sure to pay attention to Steven and his work. Dear friend, friend of the family, friend of CreativeLIVE's, and I can't wait to see you again soon in person, my man. Hopefully in the not too distance. God, it's been too long.
It's been too long.
All right, signing off. Until next time.
Peace, everybody. Thanks for hanging out.
We bid you adieu.
Pursuing creativity is arguably the most practical thing that you can do.
We humans are adaptation champions. That's what makes us human, our ability to imagine.